So, welcome to Module 2, and we're going to be looking at how to understand what your access needs are. So, as with every module, I'm going to talk a bit about the experiences I've had, the particular trips and the holidays I've been on to help to explain the relevance and some of the specifics about the individual module and the individual lessons. So, I thought the natural place to start would be Australia. So I was about 20 when the idea came. I was still at university, and I had this general idea that I'd been abroad quite a lot with my mum and dad's help and my mum and dad's arrangement, more leading on the arrangements. And I'd done some trips on my own, maybe more locally to festivals and that kind of thing, and possibly flown somewhere with a PA. But really, Australia was the first time that I went, what I would say, independently. And so, the idea came to me about doing Australia. I just thought, why not go to the other side of the world? I've always liked a bit of a challenge. And as you can imagine, being a younger person that's not really gone anywhere on their own steam, there's a lot to think about. There's a lot of fears as well. And also, Australia just is the other side of the world. You couldn't get a direct flight at the time. So there were various things to consider. But then, bringing this to the relevance of this module, there was a lot to work out about my needs. So I'd obviously always been aware I used my power wheelchair all my waking hours. I'd always been aware that I had full-time care support, like I said before, partly from my mum and dad when I was at home, and then partly from getting used to having PAs when I went to university. So I was aware of those needs, but maybe not in the context of going on holiday, of going abroad, and as I said, going to the other side of the world. So I suppose what I actually did, like some of the things I'm teaching, I did in my head just through a process over time. But I think breaking it down in this course is actually really helpful to write things down and not just rely on thoughts, and everything banging around your head can get a little bit confusing. So that's why we've got the worksheets and later on the email templates, because it just gives you a bit more structure to it. But sometimes it was me actually writing and sometimes it was thought processes. But ultimately, I started to look at what I would need to go to Australia. And so definitely one of the ticks was my wheelchair. Another one was and I worked out I needed 2 PAs because I was going to be gone it was like 3.5 weeks. And there would obviously be quite a bit of equipment because it was a longer trip. And there was the nights that I need the care support with. So again, it was important that the 2 people could share that. So I had to work out how to get my wheelchair to Australia, 2 PA care assistants. I knew I'd need my hoist to lift me from the bed to the chair to the toilet. And I had been aware of taking a hoist to different places in the world, as in flying with a hoist. But again, being the other side of the world, that felt a little bit harder to bring a hoist with me. So ultimately what I did do with this trip was get the help of a local travel agent. And I think what we're working towards in this course is being able to research and book the trip totally on our own. But I think it's absolutely fine to get help from whether it's a mainstream travel agent or it's a disability specific travel agent. Like none of that's wrong or bad. It's totally fine to get help with the journey of booking a trip. And so, being this young 20-year-old, I thought actually it would be really helpful to have someone that was more able to find the right flights, that was able to find the right hotels. Obviously, we're going to talk a bit in the next modules about finding specific accommodation, but having someone that could help me with that was really, really important. And then they didn't know about wheelchairs and care PAs and hoists. So I still had to own that information myself and be able to articulate that information for the travel agent to then go about trying to find hoist hire. Another one we did actually on the Australia trip was when we were so I went to Sydney, to Brisbane and then to Noosa. I went Sydney, Melbourne, and then Noosa, which is near to Brisbane. And it was in August time. Actually, I'm filming this in August, so it was pretty bang on the same time of year. And yeah, it meant that in Sydney it was like kind of warm spring temperature. In Melbourne it was freezing cold, which I hadn't totally prepared myself for. And then in Noosa it was really beautiful, tropical, warm beach weather. And so in that destination, there wasn't the city of going around on the local buses and the trains. So we needed an adapted vehicle. So that's another need that I had, which was a wheelchair accessible vehicle. So you can kind of see through sharing bits and bobs of the Australia trip from the perspective of understanding my needs. I had to really be really very clear on what they were. I had to be able to articulate them to other people so they were able to help me. And obviously, if I was in that instant doing the research myself, as we'll look at with some of my other trips shortly, you need to be able to look at the right criteria on the internet from that perspective of what your needs are. So we'll get off into a different lesson in a minute where I'll do a bit more of the sort of how to use the worksheet and how to break it down a little bit more for you. But ultimately for me, the trip was a success. I had 3 amazing weeks in Australia. I saw kangaroos near to Sydney. I went to some amazing museums in Melbourne and tried lots of beautiful, delicious food. And then in Noosa, where with the 2 PAs that I was with, we managed to warm up a little bit and enjoy the beach, and we saw koalas up in the trees. And so back to why go through all of sometimes a bit, I'm going to say painful, maybe it's a bit too negative, but there are challenges and there are barriers, but the reason to stick with it is because ultimately I was able to go to Australia and see all these animals and these other cultures and these other people. And on the way, I stopped in Singapore for a night each way. And that was a totally different experience as well. So if you're interested in some of the detail of the holidays, that's where I've given you the bonus to my book, which was called Everything is Possible. So I talk about what I did a bit more in Singapore, a bit more what I did in Australia as well. So if you're interested in more of the inspiration, then grab the book as the bonus. But yeah, I think I'll leave it there in terms of the relevance of Australia to this module and understanding and owning your needs as well.